Hello, you are listening to English edition of Konopný podcast dedicated to cannabis growing and another interesting information about cannabis. My name is Josef Krejčík and I'm publishing books and articles on this topic for more than 12 years. I'm wishing you a pleasant listening. Okay, hello, you are listening to Cannabis Podcast, Konopný podcast in Czech, and I'm here with Rob from Bluelab company. Hello Rob, how are you doing?
Hello, I'm fine, thank you, Josef.
We are actually in my hometown in Pilsen, so Rob came to Czech to make some visits here, and it was great for me that he found time to make this interview. So Rob, I know Bluelab company for a couple of years already, for a long time, and I'm also using some of your stuff, but can you introduce Bluelab company to our listeners?
Yes, we are a New Zealand company. We are founded more than 25 years ago. At that time, it was called New Zealand Hydroponics, and the previous CEO renamed it to Bluelab. And recently we purchased a company called Autogrow, and Autogrow is now part of Bluelab. And Autogrow is in the same field of maintaining and plant dosing and climate control. So it's a little more advanced than just the hand meters, but Autogrow is part of Bluelab since 2022.
Okay. Good. Do you know from where the name Bluelab came?
Well, blue is, of course, water.
Yeah.
And lab is that you want to test the water.
Yes,
That's actually where it comes from.
Yeah. Cool. So it leads us to tell listeners, what are you doing? Like what are you producing?
Yeah, so we make everything is made out of New Zealand. It's assembled by hand, by New Zealand people, and everything we make the goal is to manage plant health, and we want to get the highest potential possible from the plants. So in order to do that, you need proper equipment to measure EC, pH, and we also make dosing equipment to dose pH to the right level, but also nutrients. So A, B, C, up till 12 different kind of nutrients we can dose into our system or in a irrigation system. We tried the highest quality possible. Everything is checked before it's put in the box, and before it's sent away, everything is quality checked. And that's why we also offer a good guarantee policy. And if we gonna relate to returns compared to on a global scale, we have only a fail rate of 0.2% of all the products we produce. So that's a pretty good score, and that's why we are known for a reliable brand. And because everything is produced in New Zealand, far away, we don't want to get stuff sent back. So, and the most part of the customer base is in the northern hemisphere, and it needs to be sent back to the southern hemisphere, and we don't want to do that. So we prefer to make quality over quantity. So.
Good to know. So you mentioned that you are doing pH and EC meters. It means like can you explain? Maybe there is someone who don't know what pH and EC is. So can you briefly explain what pH stands for and EC too?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, EC is abbreviation for electrical conductivity, and it measures actually you can say the salts in a solution. Mm-hmm. That those salts, those ions, are plus and minus, so that combined creates a voltage, mm-hmm. and that is a number which tells you something about how many salts are in mm-hmm. the water. Mm-hmm. And pH is the abbreviation stands for potential hydrogen ions. Mm-hmm. And that has to do with the acidity of the solution. And in order to have a good pH level, it depends on what kind of plants you have and also what you want from those plants. But with the right pH, you can create the right circumstances for your plants to absorb the nutrients. Mm-hmm. So the right pH, I always compare it to if you want to eat soup. Mm-hmm. I know Czech people like to eat soup, but yes. You usually use your spoon to mm-hmm. eat your soup. Mm-hmm. And then let's say the spoon is the right pH. Yeah. But if you do not have the right pH, you're eating your soup with a fork. Yes. So the plant is not eating enough nutrients from the food he is getting. And if you are creating the spoon for your plants, then you have the right pH.
Yeah, it's a very nice description how to explain. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I really like it. Do I have to measure pH like only in hydroponic? Like lots of people think that it's necessary only in hydroponic systems. Do I have to do that also in soil system?
In soil, depends on what kind of soil, but most of the soils have their pH is more or less buffered. Mm-hmm. And that means that it doesn't fluctuate as much as hydroponics. Mm-hmm. So it is true in hydroponics, it's more important to measure. Mm-hmm. However, in soil, it's good to measure mm-hmm. it once in a while. And especially if your soil is in a certain pH, mm-hmm. you want to keep that pH. Mm-hmm. So if you're adding new irrigation water to your system, then it's good to measure your pH and adjust the pH to the same mm-hmm. pH level of your soil. Mm-hmm. So in that sense, it's still important to measure. However, if you have a hydroponic system, the fluctuation of pH, and actually it's not often fluctuation, it's more that the level of pH or the acidity goes, that's also a little bit difficult, I think. Sometimes you talk about low pH and high acidity, and that is actually the same. But low acidity or low pH is the same as high acidity. Mm-hmm. So mm-hmm. don't make that, or try to understand. Even for me, it's often challenging to say the right things. But low pH is highly acidic. Uh-huh. But most of the time the pH goes upwards over time. So, and that has to do with the carbonides in the water and evaporation. The water warms up. That causes, and also the plants are eating. So slowly the pH goes up, and you want to adjust that because a plant likes to have a steady environment. That's mm-hmm. not only in air, but that's also in the root system. Mm-hmm. You want a steady circumstances for your plants, because mm-hmm. if the plant is experiencing stress, then he won't produce as much as you would like. So a steady pH is most important.
It's interesting what you say, because most of growers are changing pH in, let's say, in growth stage, and in flowering stage they slightly decrease pH to get higher acidity. So do you think it's a correct way, or do you think it's better to keep the same pH during whole life cycle of plant? Of course, it depends on plants, I'm sure about that. But let's say if we talk about hemp or cucumbers or tomatoes or whatever, so it's. Do you agree that it's good to make it more acid closer to harvest time to get better yield, better flowers, better fruits?
I'm not so familiar with a specific crop, but what I do know is that of course every crop has their own preferences. We have done a study about pH levels. That was in a university in California. I can't remember the name, but if you want to, on request, I can share that data. But what we have experienced, and that was because of our pH controller, that's a doser we have to test out, and we found that and that's the goal of that equipment, the pH controller, to maintain your pH level. And we did find indeed that a steady pH is most important. So it didn't actually matter, because we had 4 stages. We had stable at very acidic. So 4, we had stable, very high alkalic. The pH of 8 level was also stable, and then we had a stable pH of 7. And we had one stage where the pH was fluctuating. And we've done that with 3 different crops. And all of the crops performed better with either stable stage versus the fluctuating. So the fluctuating pH was not a good result. The steady pH was the good result. So no stress to the plant is more important than the level. Good. But certain plants require a lower EC, because then they have they are able to
lower pH.
Low pH, and then they have the right proportion of nutrients uptake. So and one plant requires a high pH, and other plants require a low pH. So, and that, if you know that, that's important. As long as you keep it stable, that is the most important thing.
Like we can also say that output from that is that if you want to change pH because you think that your plant needs higher acidity or lower pH in a flowering stage, it's good to do it step by step, not to do it like from 6.2 to 5 to 5.7 in one day.
Correct.
But let's say
day by day,
by day.
0.1
exactly. So it's I think it's good advice for growers, definitely. Can you tell us how pH meter works? Because it's like, for many people, it's like something I put to water. It's like abracadabra, and I know pH. How it works? Because in EC, I understand that it measures some electrical conductivity from one part to another part of your meter. It goes. There are two sensors or not sensors. Can you describe how pH meter works and then EC?
Yes, a little bit. A pH sensor is a sensor. You have 2 different kinds actually. You have a single junction and a double junction, and all of our instruments are double junction. And that means that it's more precise and also a longer lifespan. And that is also one of the reasons why our products are maybe seen as more expensive, but that's because of we want to have a reliable probe, sell a reliable probe, and that's why it's one part is double junction, and it's actually a pH meter is actually it's a fault meter. You could see it as a fault meter. It measures millivolts of ions, and I have some kind of I can show it to the public. What I usually show what it means that if you look at pH of 7, that's neutral, and pH of 4 and pH of 10 are opposite of each other.
Yes.
But with a more acidic, you have a plus volts, and if you have alkaline, you have minus volts. But 4 is plus 177 millivolts, and 10 is minus 177 millivolts. So it measures actually millivolts, and that millivolts is translated to a certain pH level. So that is one part, and you can also see it here. For example, 7. If you
I see.
You see that, so that the amount of zeros behind the comma is equal, but once that is changing, then so it's a millivolt meter. But in order to be able to measure those ions properly, it's really important that you keep your pH sensor moist, because if you have a dried sensor, the exchange of the ions between the outside and the inside of the sensor is blocked. It goes slow, and you want to have a proper glass tip, which is hydrated with, and not just hydrated, but with KCl solution. For example, we have KCl solution that is potassium chloride, and that potassium chloride is really important around that glass tip, because this is the bridge actually to exchange those ions from outer side to inner side, and in that way he can properly measure your acidity in your solution. So it's important to, if you're using or if you are not using your pH pen or your sensor, to submerge it into KCl solution for a longer lifespan, but also more accurate reading, quicker, and it's also easier to calibrate your sensor.
So I have to use this solution for storing. What if I don't have it? Can I use also like a plain water, or water with some soil or salt, or?
So it's a good question.
Of course, it's better to have something like that.
Well, what I would like to. Well, I don't have a. Well, I can show it here as well. But this glass tip is corrosive, so it has small, really microscopic, small holes inside. So that's way he can easily exchange those ions. But you can imagine if you have a very low EC level of water, like RO water or demineralized water. Has no EC, so there are no ions inside of that water. And what you get then, because of that solution in the sensor, is also KCl, potassium chloride. And it wants, the high concentration of ions wants to go to the low area where there is no ions, because he's seeking balance. So what happens is all those ions go slowly into that low ionic water content. It's like high pressure room and a low pressure room. When you open the door, you feel wind.
Yes.
And that's the same with the high
yes.
ions in the sensor and the low ions in the solution. And that is also the reason why pH pens or sensors are dying slowly, like a battery. They are emptying and nothing works anymore. But with the KCl solution, you are able to recharge the sensor again.
Okay.
And that's why it's important to use the KCl solution. Over time, depending how intensively you're using your sensor and how do you keep your sensor in the solution all the time, or do you take it out once a week or once a month, put it in KCl solution to recharge the ions back in the sensor, or if you do not do that, then your sensor will slowly die out. So it's important once in a while, once a week or once a month, to at least submerge it for 24 hours or overnight, so it can recharge and build back up the ions inside of your sensor. So and also an answer to your question, if you use your sensor in low ionic solutions, your pH sensor will die quicker than when your solution is higher. So let's say your EC is 2.5, for example, then the life expectancy of your sensor is higher than when you use it in 0.5 or 0.6. So please do not put your sensor in RO water, because it will kill your sensor. So it needs to have some iron. So if you want to, KCl is the best solution. If you don't have KCl, then you could temporarily use your
tap water.
Not your tap water, but your nutrient tank.
Okay.
So your reservoir water would be then the best solution.
Okay.
But it's a temporary solution. Within a couple of days, you should buy yourself a new bottle of KCl. That's the best advice I could give.
Cool. You say that I can prolong lifespan of like a probe. In general, how long I can use? Because let's say that EC meter has a longer lifespan than pH meter, right?
Yeah, EC can, as long as you maintain the sensors properly, and that's only, in our case, cleaning. We have, for example, this EC sensor, our truncheon, has a flat surface. Just clean it. Give it a rub with this one and with some solution we've got here. And that's the conductivity probe cleaner. Just a little paste on that with some water, clean it, rinse it. And if you do that, let's say every week as well, you just need to include a maintenance chart for yourself during the week. But if you do that, then you can use this truncheon for many years.
Good.
This has glass, so you don't want to drop this, because then the glass drops. But this one, it's just a sensor. I can just drop it on the floor, and it's just so it's very robust. I have seen one laying on a heating system, and it was got hot and it melted, and it was like curved like a banana, but it was still working. So as long as you use the same batteries and you put it in the proper direction, it just it keeps on working. So EC requires only cleaning, nothing else. If you have an EC pen or sensor, and it says I need calibration. Actually, the reason why you need to calibrate it is that you need to compensate the dirt. So, and we prefer to clean it instead of compensating the dirt. That's what you actually do with EC sensors, pens, if you need to calibrate it. So, cleaning is what we actually recommend, because that makes sure your EC reading is accurate.
Okay, so I saw that I have to calibrate it because something is changing inside. So it's only dirt. Yeah,
that's only dirt. It's only dirt. For pH, yes, it is changing. The slope is changing, and you want to correct it for pH. EC, it's just dirt compensation. Yeah.
Good. And back to pH. So pH meter is not for all your lifetime. So how often how long does it take?
Like I said earlier, depending on the ionic stage of your irrigation water, that's important. But it's also important to take care of your sensors, and if you do everything properly. So don't leave it in your car while it's freezing outside. Not too hot on your dashboard in the car. Those are, of course, exceptions, but it's good to remember. Keep it clean. Use K-Shell solution and calibrate it at least once a month. Then the potency of a sensor, and for example, a pen is probably you have it in your hand all the time, that it's a little bit more vulnerable versus a sensor you keep in the nutrient solution all the time. So the handling with this is much more than versus the sensor. But in general, we have customers replacing sensors every year to be sure. pH pens, I've got a couple of them has been 5-6 years old, still working, but it's becoming a little slower. But when you use KCl solution, it prolongs that life. But let's say for a pH pen, I think 2 or 3 years, at least 2 years, it should be possible. But like I said, it's depending on how intensively you're using it. I've got a sensor that's already 11 years old, but it's not used. So it's just one of my demos. If you're not, it's if you keep, like I said, KCl is really important to lengthen the life of your sensor.
Can you tell us what's the difference? You already mentioned the price level of your products. Can you explain the difference between like cheap pens and let's say more expensive pens? Because I know lots of growers are going to grow shop and buy the cheapest stuff they have because it's like a few hundreds of crowns or maybe 1,000. It's of course, because when you are trying to build up your small grow room, you don't want to spend a fortune for equipment. But anyway, what I heard, and I have some experience with growing for some time, and every time I talk to some professionals, they tell me that the very cheap one is like for one grow cycle, and then you can throw it away. So tell us what's the difference? Like, what's the basic difference between like good ones or more expensive and the cheapest?
Well, it's I actually never analyzed the cheapest brands out there. I didn't find a good reason for that because every time I ask feedback from retailers, because I speak with a lot of retailers about of course equipment of ours, but also what are the competition doing. So the cheapest ones are, like you said, I've heard that before. One cycle is maybe the maximum, but also the accuracy is not guaranteed. So it's not okay. You get a measurement and maybe quickly, but you don't know how accurate that is. Usually it's also one junction versus two junctions. Our sensors are really waterproof, so up till here, you can just submerge it in the water, where others are only waterproof for the first 2 centimeters. And so that makes it that makes a big difference. We like to keep things simple. And if you have an ambition to become a professional grower, or at least get the most out of your plants, you want to start off with the right equipment. And with the Bluelab range, if you get to know the pH pen, you can also use our more advanced Pro controller, because it works more or less the same. The calibration works the same. Maintenance is the same. The way we are manufacturing things is the same. The same kind of material, plastics. It just feels nice and familiar if you go from the pH pen to the Pro controller or to the pH control. So it's a range of, let's say, it's the Volkswagen car. If you start with a Polo, but if you start driving the Passat, it almost looks the same. Vipers are work at the same time. It's just the same, more or less, look and feel. And that makes it, I think, a big advantage if you start with Bluelab, because you don't have to learn a new kind of equipment. It's also like the iPhone. I'm not sure if I can.
I just wanted to mention it. That it's like Samsung or Android or Apple. Once you start to use one, and you are using all the time a phone with the same operational system, so it's easy. So it's good to know that with Bluelab you can upgrade and you don't have to learn a new thing. This is in a nutshell.
This is one of the biggest, but also what I also point out often is that we have normal batteries, and where the competition usually use those button cell batteries, it's a mess. You never have the right size in your drawer because it's or too wide or too flat or too thick so that's a challenge, and you have always normal batteries somewhere in your drawer. For example, in your remote control, just take it out and put it in the combo meter and it works again. So that is also one reliable thing. And like I said, it's waterproof, really robust. It cannot break because there is no space in the buttons, so there is no you cannot get it dirty or so. So it's that's why it's really reliable and a little bit more expensive. But I want to add, actually, it's not so much what things are costing, but more what it will. What is the profit? Well, what is your win? And when the win is proper pH levels and right EC levels, then you have a higher yield, likely, than when you do not measure your water properly. So, okay, maybe you spent, I'm not good so much in crowns, but let's say you spend 500 crowns more versus the competition, but your yield is 2 times bigger because of you have measured. So what is, in that sense, what is expensive then?
I say the same thing, that sometimes people are trying to save money on something with what in the end will bring them more money back, so that's how it is.
And also what I like to, I'm also here a little bit to promote the brand. Our customer service is also pretty high standard. I deliver my business card everywhere. We train retailers how to advise customers how to use Bluelab. So in general, you probably get better and more information, more help when you buy Bluelab, because we want to have happy growers. And we are not, the main focus is not a profit and quantity of sales. We want a quantity of quality growers. That is our aim, actually.
Good. I only tell that links to Bluelab and some also handbooks you will find on my website, and also if you watch a YouTube video, you will find links under video. Rob, we were talking about if it's necessary to measure pH also in a soil or EC in soil. Some people do it the way that they have, let's say, hydroponic equipment like EC and pH meter, and put water in soil pot with soil, and measure water which comes out from soil. Do you think? Exactly. Yeah. Do you think it's like a good way, or is it a good option how to measure EC and pH in your pot when you don't want to buy extra equipment for soil? Maybe you grow half in soil, half in hydroponic, so, or you measure quality of water in your reservoir, like pH and EC, but you also want to know what is inside pot, which is in the end the most important thing.
True. Yeah. Well, it could be a way, but it's indicative. So it's not. You just have an idea what is happening, and also if you want to measure. Or if you want to do that in that way you were saying, like on the drain, you want to do that every day, more or less in the same time. Because if you're measuring the EC from your drain, and you know what you have poured in and what comes out, then that gap is being consumed in a normal way. But now you want to pour more water because you want to have a drain, then you actually are pouring it more through. It's not being absorbed and consumed by the plant. So the value of that number is not really the reality. For pH, however, I think you can do that, but you need to keep an eye on that is probably not the right pH, but it's more or less in a certain range. And if you test that tomorrow again and the day after tomorrow, and it's more or less in that same range, and your plants look healthy, then you probably are in the right direction. So it is a helpful tool, but there are better ways to do measure. So, for example, we have a sensor, and that is this sensor, and you can measure pH in the solution, but also in soil. You just stick this in the soil, and it gives you pH reading of a low moisture content. So if you're in the area of your roots, it's easy to. So even if you put this sensor on your tongue, it gives you a pH reading already. So it can also test your own health. But what I want to say is just you don't need to do extra things. You just put it in your soil in the area where your roots are, and you measure your pH of your plants. But in the same time, you can test it in the water. So that's also what you can do. So you go from your irrigation water. Seconds later, you put it in your soil and you measure your pH there. So that's the Leap probe of Bluelab. It comes with a BNC connector. So any other device with a BNC connector, you can use this sensor on. It looks a little different than the other one to make it a difference, but it just fits on every.
It's also good that you can change a probe, and you don't have to buy a whole new
it's
equipment.
You can exchange it. And for example, this is a combo meter. This combo meter has a 5-year warranty. So it's just also with the normal batteries inside. it's the same look and feel and calibration sequence of compared to the pH pen. And then we have, let me check. Then we have this thing.
Yeah, pulse meter.
Pulse meter, and the pulse meter measures EC and moisture in the soil, and that can do it really accurate. But there are so many soils out there, and so many different cocoa varieties that it gives you the measurement of the moisture around those sensors. So it does not have a touching sensing, but it measures with a radio frequency. It's really interesting, around a volume of 300 cc. So it's like a small bottle of Coca-Cola or a can, and that measures the EC and the moisture quickly. So it's an average of the level of EC and moisture. And that makes it pretty reliable. However, you need to see it as a number which reflects the stage at that time. But if your plant is looking healthy and you are testing the same tool in a plant which is not performing well, then you know the difference between the good plant and the bad plant. Yeah. And that is your reference. So if the value of the good plant is your reference, and you want to work with that good level. It's a very nice tool to get information properly and correct, but it needs a little time to get to know the features.
Honestly, I have this meter. We use it in our experimental facility, and I have to say that it's good to use it for a longer time, and also to find a way or find data which you want to get from your pot for our plants, because when you start to use a different soil or different substrate, it gives you different data in the end. So you really have to use it for some time before you get, especially regarding moisture. Like with EC, I think with EC it's easier to change substrates. But if you check moisture, it's good to have some experience with it already. Rob, I think we mentioned slightly like temperature and pH. Lots of growers, lots of people are asking me why my pH is changing. Why yesterday I put it on 6.1 and now I have 6.7. What's the problem? What's the most common problem why pH is changing?
Well, one of the biggest issues, I'm not sure everybody is aware of, is the calcium level of your source water. So if you have a high calcium of your source water, so if you're using tap water or you're using bore water, that usually has a high, but it depends on what area you live in. Is there a river close to you? Do you have mountains with calcium source? Then, most likely, your calcium is high, and calcium puts up, or it tends to remove all the acid away from it. So you want to. You can ask your water company what is the hardness of my water, more or less. But you can also see it if you spread some of your water on a black surface and you wait one day and you see how it dries up and you have white residue. That's most likely calcium. So calcium is one of the biggest pushers to push your pH up.
Okay.
But also, the carbons in your water is also a course. The consumption of the plant is also changing your pH, especially when you have a how do you say, a recirculating system or a deep water culture. And temperature has also an influence on that. So if it's too warm, there is this changing in the water, evaporation, and so on. There are many factors which influences your pH.
And higher temperature means like a higher pH as well, or?
Yeah, likely, but it's temperature is very important, especially in hydroponics, recirculating system, deep water culture, that you maintain your level between 18 and 22 degrees. And that's because over 23, 24, you get algae, you get bacteria in your water. And plants don't like that either. So it's really important to look at the temperature of your hydroponic system as well. So can we say that higher temperature means like higher pH, or is there some like? There is a correlation. There is a correlation, but not as hard, not as straight, because it depends on the quality of your water.
And can you say that there is some correlation with EC and pH,
Yeah, that's a good point. Well, correlation EC pH, not so much in. I'm not quite sure what you mean, but the only correlation I am aware of is if you lose, because you have hot water and you start using RO water, osmosis water, and you want to test your pH in your osmosis water, and the osmosis water doesn't have any nutrients in it, then your pH reading is not stable. So if you are using RO water, please add a little bit of CalMac or other nutrients to increase the EC level to at least 0.2, and from 0.2 you're able to measure your pH in a proper way. So that's important to know. So and that's also one of the reasons why you want to put your nutrients in your irrigation solution first before you adjust your pH.
Because some fertilizers are influencing pH more and some less. Okay, Rob, there is another thing I wanted to ask you, because we already talked about equipment for like basic equipment, like let's say that pens, I think, is the best thing to start for small growers, but you can use it also in large scale to check pH or EC in a different part. Spot checking. This is the right word for that. But do you have also some solution for fully automatic setups, or let's say, as we were talking about pH, that it's changing. So do you have something what can automatically keep pH in a desired range?
Yeah. Oh, well, yes, we do. We have, like you said, pens, handhelds, up to the box meters like the combo meter. But then we also have the Guardian. The Guardian is the same as the combo meter, measures pH, EC, temperature, but continuously. So it's like a monitor, the Guardian monitor. And then we have a Guardian Monitor Connect. And when you connect that to a device who receives the data from the Guardian to the computer, you can have an account in the cloud, and from your app on your telephone you can get the data on your phone by an app. So when there is an alarm phase, you get a notification and so on. So it's pretty safe. So that is the Guardian Connect, but we also have a pH controller. We have the pH controller to maintain pH levels in your nutrient tank. You have a set point, and let's say that is 5.9, and that equipment, that doser, the pH controller, will maintain that pH level. When it goes up slowly, usually the normal sequence is that pH goes up, like previously discussed, and when it goes to 6, it will dose again slowly to 5.9. So it really stabilizes the pH level of your irrigation water or your deep water culture system. But for example, I have one here. This is the pH controller with a small peristaltic pump. Here it goes in the acid. Here it goes out. You can set the set point, of course, but also the dosing time. And the dosing time is important because you don't want to dose until the set point, because sometimes you go below the set point, and you don't want to do that. So we have a security feature, so set your amount of seconds so you're not overshooting. So sometimes when the water is soft, then the pH drops faster than when the water is harder. So that is why you have this dosing time. And then we also have off time. Sometimes you need to mix the water with the acid, and then it will stabilize. It measures again, and then when the set point is not reached yet, it will dose again a short amount of seconds. So it's really a reliable, slow, kind of instrument to prevent stress to your plant. That's actually what it does. It's really reliable. That pump goes on, it's a peristaltic pump, so you don't have to prepare the pump so much. It's really easy to set. And like I said before, if you know how the pH pen works, you know how this works as well. The only difference is here. Of course, every equipment with an orange stripe means that it's connect, that it has a connect feature, like I said. If you have that device connected to your computer, that's called the connect stick. Connect stick, if your computer is linked to internet, to that cloud, you will receive also notifications from your pH controller. And we also have a variety of the pH controller, and that's the Pro controller that has up to 12 pumps. You can also dose your nutrients into your system. So, but it works in the same way. It's really nice, and it's nice to be confident in what your pH is doing, and if it's turning into an alarm phase, it will stop. And it will give you a notification. So it's so reliable. You can go on holiday if you want, or go on vacation for a week or for the weekend without having too much trouble.
And if something happen, you get a notification.
You get a notification.
So it's connected by Bluetooth, or let's say one computer has to be close to this.
There is this receiver, and that receiver needs to be within. The old one was 30 meters, but we have a new one, and that's about between 100 and 300 meters. But depending is how thick are the walls, and is it in the greenhouse or is it somewhere else? And that's but more or less between 300 and 300 meters, 100 and 300 meters away. So and we are releasing shortly that you will only connect it to the Wi-Fi system.
I just wanted to say that maybe in the close future it will be close.
Very close future. There will be 23 will be a release of a new Connect version that is connected to the Wi-Fi. We didn't want to do that because of the security reasons. But the protocols are now so set that we can do that. So
definitely it's something helpful for all growers. If, as you said, you are on vacation and you get a notification that something is wrong, you can call your neighbor or somebody who's responsible, and he will fix the stuff.
For example, the bottle of acid is empty. And it will it notice it's not changing my pH and then after I believe 15 attempts it will also shut down. So there are a couple of safety features there.
Good. Rob, you didn't come from New Zealand, that I know, as Bluelab did. You are from Netherlands. Can you just tell us what is your position in Bluelab? Because I forgot to introduce yourself, so it would be nice if you can tell something about you as well.
I'm based in the Netherlands, and I am that's called business development manager, and so I'm looking for opportunities to grow the Bluelab business. But that is in my area is EMEA, so officially that's Europe, Middle East, and Africa. That's a big, huge territory. So I'm not go everywhere, but. So it's like the central part of Europe, and I go also to Africa. I've got also a colleague, he's doing Spain, Italy, France, the UK, British Isles, and some of the Scandinavian countries. So we are two people who are in this area. And our main focus is to educate. Educate growers, educate retailers, educate resellers, how to advise their customers with our equipment. So what are the features, what are the benefits, how to maintain. So more or less what I'm telling here, I'm also do some trainings and seminars for growers or for retailers.
I think you educated few more people today as well, and I thank you for that. Is there something you want, some message you want to tell to growers, like mostly home growers or middle-sized growers?
Yeah, well, I would like to advise just do not make it too complicated. Simple, look at your plants, smell the soil of your plants, look at the phenotype of your plants. Are they doing well, and are you satisfied? Then I think you should be happy. There are a lot of temptations in the market. A lot of people who wants to convince you to use this or to use that. But most of the time it is not that in... I'm not quite sure how to give a good conclusion, but look at your plans and use common sense.
Okay, Rob, thank you very much that you found time to talk to Czech growers and to be invited to Cannabis Podcast, to Konopný Podcast, how it sounds in Czech. And I think we will finish for now, and I'm a little bit hungry, maybe you are too, so we can eat something here in Pilsner. Thank you one more time.
Thank you very much for having me. It was fun.
Yeah.
Okay, all the best.